I think it's safe to say that a lot of people are excited for the Batman Part 2. I mean, given the success of the first film and the Penguin HBO series, that's a given. There have been a multitude of live-action iterations of Batman in the past theatrically, but I don't think there's ever been one as fleshed out as what Matt Reeves plans to do with his universe. It really feels like Gotham is this dirty, lived-in, breathing city with so many avenues to explore, and how certain events in the theatrical releases affect Gotham citizens as a whole on a more grounded level. Seeing the immediate ramifications of the Riddler flood in The Penguin and Colin Farrell's Oswald Cobb's rise to power. There's been a lot of speculation on the overall plot of the Batman Part 2, characters involved, and who could potentially become the primary antagonist of the movie. I won't even lie, seeing the movie get delayed to October 2027 hurt a little bit. Considering the finale of The Penguin only premiered a month before the delay announcement, I wanted to see the continuation of Matt Reeves' universe more than ever after that. Got all giddy and whatnot, thinking, man, I only have to wait a couple of years to see Robert Pattinson's Batman on the big screen beat the brakes off the Penguin. We eating good. Not much is known about the story of the Batman Part 2. All we know is that it takes place a few weeks after the events of the first movie and the Penguin, leading us closer to the end of the year. Despite Matt Reeves having yet to turn in a full script, the plan is still for the movie to start production by the end of this year, if the statements from Matt Reeves himself and Robert Pattinson are any indication.
Obviously the release date changed for Batman Part 2.
Yeah.
You want the script to be in a good place?
Of course.
So are you happy with the progress you're making and the release date you have now?
Yes, absolutely. No, things are, this year we're going to be shooting and I'm very excited about it. And it's there's been a lot of stuff going on and, it's taken longer than I would have wanted. But also, I'm super excited about what we're doing. So I really can't wait to share that with everybody.
We haven't shot it yet.
Oh, you haven't shot it? When do you start shooting it?
I think end of the year.
Okay,
Yeah.
I see. I thought
It's
it
a
got...
while.
What intrigues me and a lot of other fans the most is simply who the villain of the movie could be. There's a vast array of compelling rogues Matt Reeves could implement into the script that challenge or elevate the skills of Bruce's character. Potentially having him go up against threats he could never have imagined could become a reality. However, there are some key things to note on how Matt Reeves intends to use some of Batman's more iconic villains. The thing people need to realize is that the universe under Matt Reeves, or as he likes to call it, the Batman epic crime saga, has no intention of delving into the fantastical. He's gone on record multiple times stating how he feels drawn to finding the grounded version of a lot of elements from Batman's mythology. It would pose an interesting challenge to find a way to ground characters like Mr. Freeze if they were ever to be incorporated into this franchise. You could still see villains like Bane, Poison Ivy, Killer Croc, or even Clayface. It just wouldn't be the traditional versions you're thinking of that have supernatural abilities or enhancements, which is a major reason as to why Robert Pattinson's Batman in the DCU is implausible. There's definitely room for that Batman to grow into being more capable of dealing with supernatural threats, but that was never the intention. James Gunn went on to add how important it was for the Clayface movie to be set in the DCU, a villain who's very much outside the grounded, non-super meta characters in Matt Reeves' world. So with that in mind, don't expect to see any crazy, bombastic, superpowered characters in any of Matt Reeves' movies. While it would be interesting to find more practical uses of the more outlandish Batman villains, I'd prefer to not use those characters if you aren't going to use them to their full extent. You could make some exceptions for someone like Mr. Freeze, as the most compelling aspect of his character is his motivation to save his wife Nora. It could be a cool way in thematically demonstrating how grief and obsession can turn people into something unrecognizable, paralleling Bruce's own struggles. Maybe Victor Freeze utilizes experimental military tech or black market weapons. A slightly more sympathetic villain whose sole motivation is for the benefit of someone else to help stand out from the Riddler. I speak for a lot of people when I say we have no interest in seeing the Joker as the main antagonist of the Batman Part 2. I wouldn't mind if he made a couple of appearances, is mentioned once or twice, or is even sprinkled in the plot a little bit, but we are long overdue in giving some of Batman's other rogues the spotlight. Batman is regarded as having the best rogues gallery in comics, yet many live-action adaptations don't explore his vast roster too deeply. Also, given the reception of Joker 2, a little distance from the character wouldn't hurt anybody given how oversaturated he's become. I'm not playing with you, Matt Reeves. I'm sure you can make a good script with him as the main villain, but we don't need that right now. If I see him as a major part of the story, that might be a no-go.
Yeah, you might be too freaky for us. Get him the fuck out of here. Appreciate it, man. Yeah.
Even if the selection of characters is just limited to more grounded or non-superpowered villains, there's still a good amount of antagonists to choose from. What I've always wanted from a Batman sequel is a City of Fear kind of thing. Make Scarecrow the main antagonist, with fear as a central theme within Gotham City and its citizens. In light of everything that's happened after the Riddler flooded the city and the subsequent increase in crime, it could be compelling to have Batman face a villain attempting to use fear in Gotham, while also learning to become more of a symbol of hope after the end of the first movie to combat it. Also, I think the use of Scarecrow's fear toxin would make for some really cool visuals and maybe delve more into the psychosis of Batman. An excuse to showcase wacky comic book elements without it being too unrealistic, since it would be hypervisual hallucinations. I'm aware he was already used in Batman Begins, but I think there's a lot more potential in making Jonathan Crane a more formidable foe for Batman. If you want to play into the psychological elements of Batman, Hugo Strange or Mad Hatter would be good choices as well. If there's ever an emphasis on Bruce's arc revolving around reflecting on his personas of Batman and Bruce Wayne and learning to step into the light more as Bruce, it would work really well to have a villain who aims to tear all of that apart. Hugo Strange being one of the few antagonists who deduces Batman's identity. The Penguin series gave us a glimpse of how things are run in Arkham State Hospital and how the inmates are treated. You could easily have Hugo Strange as a psychiatrist at Arkham who secretly conducts experiments on patients and manipulates events from the shadows. Additionally, the only live-action adaptation of Hugo Strange is in the Gotham TV show on Fox, so he'd be a villain most casual audiences wouldn't be too familiar with. It's interesting to consider where the line is drawn in pushing the edge of the fantastical without fully delving into the more unrealistic aspects of certain villains' abilities. I wonder if Mad Hatter's mind control tech would be too much. If so, I guess they could use hypnotic suggestion or certain drugs to manipulate his victims. While not giving away any strong hints about the film's story, Matt Reeves did offer some insight on the state of Gotham City as a whole. There's a lot more division in the city and people becoming at odds with one another after the end of the first movie. The Batman Part 2 digs into the story of deeper corruption and explores aspects of Batman's character we haven't seen yet. Taking into account the implications of a divided Gotham and more people being at odds with one another, it's not totally out of the window for the movie to focus on a potential gang war that's brewing after the death of Carmine Falcone. Perhaps you could have different factions fighting for control over Gotham, and it would be the perfect opportunity to introduce someone like Roman Sionis, the Black Mask, someone willing to challenge the Penguin's territory and newly formed status by the end of his series. If the seeds of corruption that were planted in the first movie are being explored further, then now's a perfect opportunity to introduce Harvey Dent into this universe. I wouldn't want them to just redo The Dark Knight, where the sequel introduces Harvey Dent wanting to do good in Gotham, willingly working alongside Batman and Jim Gordon just for him to turn into Two-Face by the middle or the third act. It'd be more effective to have the audience sort of latch onto Harvey Dent for at least a movie and maybe an additional series before saving his transformation into Two-Face in the Batman Part 3 or something, to really hone on the tragedy of what Gotham can do to those who go out of their way to make a difference and go up against the corruption that's cemented itself for decades, possibly centuries if you want to go into Court of Owls territory. The Court of Owls are among some of the most fan-requested villains to appear in the Matt Reeves universe, and for good reason. If corruption is a big thematic takeaway in this potential trilogy of noir Batman movies, the Court of Owls are the epitome of that. A secret society operating from the shadows for centuries so effectively, Batman didn't even know of their confirmed existence until later in his career as a crime fighter, which is significant as Batman knows the city inside and out. If they were to be integrated in Part 3 or any spin-off projects in the works, there's a lot you would have to alter or get rid of as they're deeply rooted in a more fantastical setting, from having nearly zombified ninja assassins who are hundreds of years old to having access to advanced technology, resources, and mystical elements, as talents have been resurrected from the dead. I could see them really posing a threat to Batman and the Bat family better in the DCU, since Batman in that universe is already set in a fantastical world. In addition to being a crime fighter for a while and a cemented part of the interconnected universe with established heroes, the significance of the Court of Owls there I think would align more with the comic version in Scott Snyder's run than in Matt Reeves' world. For other characters like Bane, I think I'm okay in not seeing another grounded-esque version of the guy. We already had that in The Dark Knight Rises. Sure, Matt Reeves could probably execute the character a lot better, but there are already plans for him to be used in the DCU. Professor Pig is another popular pick I've seen roam around amongst the fandom. Professor Pig could really help elevate the movie's tone, introducing new levels of body horror into the universe and the depravity of some of these criminals. His obsession with turning people into Dollatrons or perfect beings through surgical means could fit well well into the themes of someone trying to impose his own order on the chaos, which would resonate with Batman's struggles to maintain control. Another important question I've seen brought up plenty of times is the possible inclusion of Dick Grayson or Robin. Is it plausible that Robert Pattinson's Batman would take on a young Dick Grayson, laying the foundation for him becoming Robin? I don't know if there are any specific rules set in stone at DC Studios on what James Gunn and Matt Reeves can and cannot do with their respective Batman universes, so that their ideas don't clash with one another or that they both don't end up doing the same exact thing. All we know is that Reeves has had conversations to ensure that both the DCU and his universe don't crash into each other in terms of storytelling. That's important to note because of James Gunn's plans to incorporate the Bat family in The Brave and the Bold and the wider DCU, which is set to introduce Damian Wayne as the next Robin and undoubtedly give us glimpses of established Bat family characters like Nightwing. Currently, it's up in the air whether or not the dynamic duo animated movie centered on the early friendship between Dick Grayson and Jason Todd is set in the DCU or is an Elseworlds tale. Gunn was pretty much like, yeah, it could fit, but we're not sure yet. The story is very unique, so it may or may not mesh well with the DCU when it all comes into fruition. I'd always assumed it was going to be an Elseworlds movie given the use of puppetry animation and Dick Grayson and Jason Todd becoming acquainted with one another before either one becomes Robin. If you're not even sure if it could fit in the DCU, I don't see why you would try to entertain the idea if you have a general outline for these characters set in stone. It's kind of weird to go back and forth on it, but it does indicate the wider plans to utilize the more recognizable Bat family characters in the DCU. So if Matt Reeves wanted to use Robin or plant the proper seeds in the Batman Part 2, how would it be distinct enough to not pose too many similarities to The Brave and the Bold? Some of the more obvious key differences would be who holds the Robin moniker in both DC movies. The Brave and the Bold would feature Damian Wayne, and a hypothetical Matt Reeves movie with Robin would likely focus on Dick Grayson. I highly doubt Part 2 would introduce Dick into the Batman mythos and have him become Robin by the end of the same movie. Bruce Wayne at this point in time just discovered how Batman should become more of a symbol of hope and hasn't really expressed himself more as Bruce Wayne to the general public as a socialite. I'd imagine this would be a focal point of his character to do more good for the city in a public manner.
Mr. Wayne, you really could be doing more for this city. Your family has a history of philanthropy, but as far as I can tell, you're not doing anything. I want to change that.
I've seen some people try to argue this Batman is too young to have a Robin and is still getting the hang of things, or that it's too early for him to have a sidekick. But isn't that kind of the point? Timeline wise, Dick Grayson's introduction in the sequel would align with when his parents die in the source material, which is typically around year 3 of Batman's career. Since the first film took so much inspiration from The Long Halloween, it wouldn't be all that surprising if Matt Reeves took inspiration from that book's sequel, Dark Victory, which was a modern retelling of Dick Grayson's origin story and him coming into contact with Batman after his parents' death at Hilly Circus. If it ever comes to pass that there are 2 live-action Robins alongside Batman in both the DCU and Matt Reeves' universe, there are thematic elements Reeves could incorporate to help the story stand out and be compelling. Dick Grayson's inclusion should serve as a means of helping Bruce pull himself out of the darkness and bring a sort of levity to crime fighting unprecedented to this Batman. People claim he needs more growth before mentoring a Robin, but I'd argue him seeing the tragedy Dick went through with his parents and bringing him in allows Bruce to grow as a character. It allows for an interesting exploration of Batman's influence on someone else. Bruce could start as a more distant mentor, but as the relationship grows, we could see him begin to understand the value of a newfound family and teamwork. Even if the plan isn't to utilize Dick Grayson or Robin in the second movie, I think it would please a lot of fans to see just a glimpse or a tease near the end of Bruce attending Hilly Circus. Or if Dick is included in the movie, you could start an overarching character arc that leads to him becoming Robin by the 3rd entry. Whatever direction Matt Reeves chooses to go in with the future of his Batman franchise, I'm sure it'll be great stuff. Both the Batman and the Penguin have been some of the best pieces of comic book media in a long time. Sure, there are frustrations with the emphasis on a more grounded approach, preventing certain characters or storylines getting their time to shine as one might have expected, but luckily the DCU is set to have a very fantastical Batman and a full-fledged Bat family. We might be getting live-action Batman iterations that explore the character in ways that haven't been done before. Ben Affleck's Batman in the DCEU had a lot of missed potential in exploring the character's history and mythos prior to Batman vs Superman, but sadly he never got a solo movie. Many previous incarnations have been self-contained that shy away from the character's vast roster of supporting cast. If Matt Reeves can maintain a consistent level of quality throughout all 3 movies, we might witness the greatest Batman movie trilogy of all time.